All right, guys, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and today is Thursday, May 31st, the end of the month for May. And looking at the S&P chart, no follow through basically from yesterday. Would have liked to see in a perfect world, of course, to go for us to kind of reclaim some of these levels and get back higher, but we're kind of right back. To the downside of this little range that we got going on here. So, a couple like analogies I just kind of thought off the top of my head about today's market and just watching or just kind of reading some of the headlines that are going on. Of course, tariffs were in focus today, so it just feels like there's a lot of landmines right now with headlines. There's a lot of things going on. We talked about that a little bit in the morning. We just talked about how you got Europe, which basically closed pretty ugly. Europe, let's see if I can bring this up here. Yeah, still having some issues. I did see Deutsche Bank came back at the end of the day, so nice for financials, for those in any financials. But Euro stocks ended down 1%, and the DAX finished down 1.4%. Basically, everything on the list, even the Swiss market. Look at what happened to the Swiss market at the end of the day, down 1.4%. So it's kind of just going back. It's almost like every other day we have something positive say or something negative to say, but it seems like obviously today with the market down, SPY's down 60 basis points. Qs were, had some decent strength for the majority of the day. It kind of looked like they wanted to go higher. I think if there wasn't so many, I don't want to say if this didn't happen, but they did exhibit some strength early on. Just tough again with a lot of things going on. These trade tariffs going on with Europe as well with Canada and Mexico. Justin Trudeau was on about them and basically really saying some nasty things, and so that's on the tape, and that of course was around midday, and the market just kind of gave back anything that it was kind of clinging on to early on. So that's the environment that we're in right now, and you kind of look at this and you wonder why the S&P is just having such a hard time, and I think the more interference that we have, the more it's kind of going to be bumpy like this. But, and those days where it's going to be a little bit clean in terms of not so many tape bombs, then I think the market can kind of do what it wants to do, which is maybe drift a little bit higher. Small caps were actually down on the day. I was singing their praises yesterday and talking about the crazy outperformance. They cooled off today. They're probably due for that. And just basically an inside day. There was a nice support level that we caught on IWM. It looks like we're right around there, the top of value for the week, 162.77. You could just kind of see what that looks like. But again, the valuers really give us some good levels. But again, holding that right in there. There was a lot of option activity. I'll just talk about a couple other names and some sectors. I thought that, what I talked about, I think at the end of yesterday was the Chinese internets. They continue to have some momentum here and there. So this is the Chinese internet. You would think that this group, under these circumstances would be, maybe lagging, especially when there's a lot of international headlines, but, pretty good, the KWEB ETF. And that was one of your best performing groups. Small cap biotech was also strong today. The FANG stocks also held in there today. So it seems like people are going to, these names are holding up pretty well, like the FANG stocks. I think people would almost rather be in the FANG stocks than, things like the transports. Transports were down 1.4% today, IYT. That taking a beating. And again, a lot of back and forth in that as well. The industrials also, things like this is going to be, of course, one of the most heavily hit groups. Or same thing with the Dow. The Dow Industrials DIA was down 1% on the day. The industrials ETF was down 1.4%. Right? When you hear about trade tariffs, things like Caterpillar, things like Boeing are going to go down on that. But there was a dip buyer in some of these names today. Boeing, for instance, somebody bought, which we'll have to see. Maybe something's going on. I find it hard to believe that somebody's spending $2.45 for calls that expire tomorrow. But this was an opening trade, and it was swept too. There was also some further out. So these are just all the sweeps that happened. I'm just searching by sweeps. There was some further out calls that went up, which were not swept. So kind of interesting. But this was 1,500. Open interest was 1,000 on these SEP 350 calls. Might as well bring up the Boeing chart. That's the biggest weight in the XLI ETF. It kind of looks like a little bit of a bear flag happening here. So we'll see if that holds in here before. I actually like the Boeing chart, to be honest. As long as it holds the 20-day moving average, might have that extension to the upside. Again, if the headlines, let me just say that before with anything, with as long as the headlines die down a little bit. So, I think that regardless of like what exactly the headlines are, we are getting a high number of them right now. So I've talked about this, the one thing that's pretty much in common in my videos that I've been, that I do on a nightly basis, Monday through Thursday, is that, definitely this continues to be kind of the stick and move market. I traded Google today. This was a really nice trade today. Looks like it, and I actually sold it close to the highs today, so I got lucky. I played this right off the bat, off the first 5-minute bar, and then I took the profits in that one, and I rolled out to, and then I rolled out to, I had the weeklies on, or next week's calls, and then I rolled that out to a call spread, and I took the call spread at the end of the day. I took that off. I don't know why the candle shows like that. It looks pretty clean to me. I feel like I'm seeing this with a lot of candles. They're not really adding up. It looks like Google closed on the highs. But in any event, I like this. I like this setup in Google. You just don't know on a day-to-day basis, and I say this, and again, this video is for information purposes only. But for me, you have to take targets. I would love to be able to ride the winners as much as possible, but when you have something like today, like I had on my first trade of the day in Google, like a 40% profit. Just take it. Take the it's 40% in this market. Again, you try to keep the last piece on. The Google was not a big trade for me, by the way, but still, 40%. Just take it. And then I rolled it into another trade, and also had 20% gains on that one. So, that's for me well enough for kind of a short-term trade. You just can't be greedy right now in this environment. I wanted to see. I'm really curious to see if Google actually punches out and takes this. But tomorrow's another day. We'll have all day kind of tomorrow. And sometimes when you take the trades off too, your mind just kind of frees up a little bit, right? When you keep a trade on, you're very hooked into it. When you don't have a trade on, you can look at things a little bit more objectively. But this was a hell of a trade, and up 2.1%. So glad we found it. I can't take complete credit for it. One of the members today in the room mentioned it. So first thing in the morning, we had a quick conversation about it, and I was like, "Hey, this looks pretty good," and I put it out as a trade setup. So nice to find that, and again, that's our job, to find the names that are going to do this in a crappy tape where the S&P is down 60 basis points, right? So just to go through a couple of the names that we saw option activity in. Micron, I think we talked about Micron. There was a little bit of dip buying in Micron, but this is not hindsight, right? We talked about this yesterday. We talked about this in the trading room. Somebody asked me about Micron midday yesterday, and when it took out this VPOC, I said, take your profits. I said, I can't tell you what to do, but I said, look, it's already made the move that you would, what else are you looking for? From 46 to 63. And again, I'm not. There's so many people. There's so many people on Twitter that say this stuff after the fact and when it's obvious. But I'm not right on everything. I have an IGT trade on that got smoked that I put on yesterday. So there, there's a good example. But Micron again. What else were you looking for? Where on a move, basically straight up. What is that? A 60-degree angle up and to the right. For 2 or 3 weeks. How much more do you think it could possibly go? So I think that's justified today's move. All right, but I did see that. That was one of the first things that caught my eye. A couple names in Brazil seeing some call buying. Brazil's been under pressure. They've been having strikes, beef and pork, and or is it poultry? I don't know. Sorry, but I know Brazil's been under pressure. Here's the EWZ chart. It's really even on Monday when we were off was the day when it really moved down. It's been consolidating way below the 200-day moving average. So that was a good place to get out. I could tell you what I've done. I was long EWZS, and I got out on the 200-day moving average. Good thing. Look at what this has done, and I think I got out right around here actually. But saving, having a small loser, or actually this was a winner for me in EWZS because I got in lower. But once these things break, right? Here's a retest, 200-day moving average, place to add risk. Here's a retest, broke a little bit, broke back above, swing up, retest again, and then retest and good night. So, the 200-day moving average really comes into play a lot for me in my analysis. But anyway, what I wanted to get to was there was some buying in YPF. But just kind of, risk management is so important in this tape right now to try to get you, don't have any of these big losers. So you got to pay attention. I got stopped out in my cash trend portfolio on a bunch of things on Tuesday. And it is what it is. I'm just, none of them were big losers. A couple of them were still winners, even though they got stopped out around the 200-day moving average. Just, reset. Reset if and I hate to sell stuff on a down day, but sometimes these things have a lot more downside to them. So, sometimes you have to bite the bullet and sell a little bit on when things are down if they're breaking major support. So anyway, that's kind of a long-winded response to showing you option activity. But again, it's all about the risk management. So YPF Hammer Bar today, pretty oversold. Another name which the other way that the other thing that I've talked about over and over and over the last few days is for some of these names we've actually been seeing decent call buying, some decent signals all week. You can't take every trade. So what I do half the time is I set an alert on where I care. So look at this trade in Melly that went up. This is a sizable trade, right? And I'm just looking by sweeps, right? Aggressive when they sweep multiple exchanges. September 300 calls, basically at the money calls, going all the way out to September. Look at the size of this trade: 700,000 premium, 300,000 premium, $267,000 of premium, right? So they're well over, almost $1.5 million in option premium. Now that's a trade. Somebody's putting down a chip and saying, hey, this thing's been oversold. I want to get involved. For me, I would rather wait till this thing gets above the 200-day moving average, which is not that far. I even set an alert today on the 5-minute bar, and it never went off. So, and the other point is that a lot of these trades you could get into much cheaper than what goes up on the tape. So thank goodness, right? I set an alert here at 304. It's done nothing but go down. And we're seeing that in a lot of trades that look pretty good. They're just, you could get into them cheaper. Like IGT. Look at big block of IGT calls went up yesterday. And a little bit today, a little bit of calls. There's a little bit of puts today too, but look at this thing. Down 4.2%. And I mentioned that this looked like a pretty good chart, for looking for a bounce. And it's below the 200, it broke below the 200-day moving average today. So, so a lot of these, my point is, again, is that you don't have the jump right when you see the option activity. You could kind of just put an alert on where you care at a level, let it show a little bit of confirmation, and go from there. Xilinx was I have Xilinx on here twice by accident, but I don't know. I thought maybe they might have been buying Xilinx going into the MRVL earnings, which I think MRVL is flat after earnings. But who knows? I mean, you kind of try to think of reasons when they're buying, calls that expire in what 2 weeks, right? You only have basically 10 trading days for something like that. So I try to come like, why are they buying a big, over and over aggressively? Why are they buying Xilinx calls? So it could be something that I just, we don't always know. But I do like to try to put together the puzzle of the call buying. So Xilinx, they also bought, in addition to buying the June calls several times today. They also put up this trade, which was, it looks like September calls they bought and September puts they sold. So, you know, a little bit further out trade, but just like the Melly trade, right? I mean, that I understand a little bit better, right? They're going out, they're going all the way out to September. They're giving themselves plenty of time for the stock to recover. Maybe for Xilinx, there's some short-term catalyst that's coming up in the next 10 business days, right? But, aggressive trade. What I did with this trade is I actually sold a little bit of put spreads. I decided to sell some premium. It's not a great looking chart. It's been pretty sideways. Lamb Research also saw some calls. This is also a choppy looking chart to me, and it closed on the lows, today. So none of those really reacted very well. ADI actually saw some calls. I actually like this chart the best out of the three, and I think this was the smallest trade. But there was some analog devices calls. This thing looks like it's ready to break out. So I would keep an eye on this one. 3,700 of those. Again, very short term. What are they buying these for? So maybe we'll know. Maybe we'll know something. I don't know. Maybe it's something with China tariffs. I don't know. Who knows? But they bought Xilinx, ADI, as well as Lamb Research. Lamb Research, they went out a little bit further and bought July. There was a little bit of Bristol Myers calls going out. That's been a tough trade. We talked about Melly unit, a little bit of goose calls going up. Again, contrary to what people say, I half the time. Let me just. I don't mind saying this. I really don't. But if you see a name go up like this and you're searching for option activity to justify the move, shame on you. This is not going to move the stock. So I saw a couple of people talking about, oh, my goose calls bought today. You're out of your mind. there's like $10,000. This could be my order, and I'm not going to move the stock. Right? This is $12,000 of premium. Do you really think 300 contracts are going to move goose? You're crazy. So I see this on Twitter, people saying that, oh, repeat activity in goose. No, that's not what's driving the stock. That's somebody like me who could be just saying, hey, I want to ride the momentum. But a little bit different, like the Melly trade, the three names that went up in the semis, is not this. This is not, I mean, you're basically looking for option activity to justify why a name's up. Sorry. There was some Snap calls that went up today. Snap's been a tough name. We've seen a lot of repeat call buying in this name, and not much has happened. But Andrew Leff was out today putting a price target, I think, at $17 on it. This video is getting a little bit long. Apologize. But Win, again, I don't know why they're buying Win. Macau numbers are out tomorrow, or is it tonight or tomorrow morning? At least before the open tomorrow. Really heavy trade in Win that went up. Again, look at the size of this trade, 570,000, and they bought more. So going out to August, the August 195 is pretty much at the money. Look at what Win's doing here. So again, who knows? It could be because the Macau numbers are coming out tomorrow, or it's somebody who just likes Win in general. This is one of the better acting, go figure, one of the better acting casino names. The chart looks great in Win. So, keep that name on your radar. Again, you could structure these trades any way you want to. You don't have to buy the August 195 calls. Win options are not that bad to trade. You could pick other contracts and maturities. A couple other names that hit at the end of the day. There's a little bit of Citigroup calls that went up. I feel like there was some also short dated calls in FTC. I'll tell you, this FTC chart doesn't look bad. You know, a lot of bull flags we're seeing in a lot of different things, but look at that come into this. So I would keep an eye on this name. Again, big move on earnings, follow through, and digestion for a couple weeks. Short dated calls, again, I could care less about calls that expire in 10 days. Might want to go out a little bit further if you like that name. Boeing, like I said, Boeing did see some calls. Also, saw this big block of calls. It's a little bit suspect to me that somebody's putting that much of a chip behind at this point. But 7,000 of these, $4.7 million. Woof. Going after December, and I think that's probably in the money. So that's a pretty big player. Even if they're substituting stock, that's a lot of stock. $4.7 million. Is pretty extended, but look at what it did today. Amazing. Up another 11%. What a move this thing has gone. $4 to 17. Unbelievable. And no looking back in terms of price coming back in at all. So anyway, that's today's recap. You know, again, a lot of these trades, you kind of want to set alerts all over the place and wait for that confirmation. If something doesn't look right in terms of the chart, wait till it starts to react. I think Melly is a good example of that. For me, I'm waiting for it to cross the 200-day moving average. All right, guys, thanks for watching the video. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.